Narcissistic will regret their actions. Friends, let's talk about something deeply personal, the impact of our actions on the people around us. It's easy to become consumed with ourselves, to get lost in the mirror of our own reflection. We live in a world where self-preservation can often blur into self-centeredness. But here's a truth that I want you to hear loud and clear. Our actions have consequences. When we focus solely on our own needs, desires, and perceptions, we forget the most important thing, our relationships with others. These relationships, whether with family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, are built on trust, kindness, and vulnerability. And when we abandon those principles, when we choose to manipulate, disregard, or hurt others for our own gain, we ultimately do more harm to ourselves than we can imagine. Now, let me remind you of something I deeply believe. You can't live a life of true connection while wearing armor made of self-interest. If we only ever serve our own needs, we rob ourselves of the most meaningful experiences that come from mutual love, growth, and empathy. The consequences of selfishness are not always immediate, but they are inevitable. Here's the reality: narcissism may serve you for a short while, but it will leave you empty in the end. You'll look around and realize that the people who mattered most to you have slowly drifted away, leaving behind only the hollow sound of your own voice echoing back at you. In the end, you'll regret the moments you missed, the opportunities for true connection, the love you didn't give, the kindness you withheld. These regrets don't come from external pressures or circumstances, but from within your own heart. Deep down, you will know that the version of yourself you were living was not the version that could truly make a difference. So if you feel lost, or if you're finding yourself too often turning inward and forgetting the people who matter, I ask you to pause. Step out of that cycle. Turn around and face the people around you, the ones who truly see you, not just the mask you wear, but the real, vulnerable, imperfect person beneath it. It's not too late to change. You don't have to keep going down the path of regret. The beauty of life is that we can always rewrite our story, and we can always choose love, empathy, and connection over ego and self-serving behavior. The first step toward transformation is the recognition that it's not all about you. The mirror of self-reflection. We all have moments when we look into the mirror, but too often we only see a reflection of our own desires, frustrations, and judgments. The challenge, however, lies in seeing beyond the surface. What if we stopped merely examining how we look and started to really look at what's inside? What if, when we look into the mirror, we saw not just our faces, but our hearts? That's where the real growth begins. True self-reflection isn't about judgment. It's about curiosity and honesty. When we get stuck in a cycle of self-obsession, we miss out on something deeply important: understanding how our actions affect the people around us. It's like wearing blinders that limit our field of view. Our relationships, our communities, and the world itself are more than just the roles we play. Each person you encounter is a mirror for something inside you, whether that be an opportunity to learn, grow, or heal. But to see that requires looking deeply, not just glancing at the surface of the moment. We live in a culture where self-promotion and self-interest are often seen as virtues. There's an underlying belief that if you focus solely on yourself, you will rise above, succeed, and be celebrated. But self-obsession doesn't build relationships, it isolates you from connection. Self-reflection asks you to pause, to question your motivations, and to ask yourself, what's really driving me? Is it fear, insecurity, or a desire for approval? And how does this affect the people I claim to care about? The more we focus on our own reflections, the less we see the reflections of others. Our view becomes distorted, and we start to believe that our own needs, desires, and struggles are the most important. But in truth, everyone we encounter is carrying their own burdens, their own stories, and their own reflections. The world becomes more vibrant when we stop looking at it through our own narrow lens and start seeing the richness of others' experiences. Authentic self-reflection isn't about finding fault with yourself. It's about embracing who you are, both your strengths and weaknesses. It's about asking yourself, am I truly showing up in the world with kindness, compassion, and authenticity, or am I hiding behind an armor of perfection or superiority? This is hard work. It requires humility. It requires vulnerability, but the rewards are immeasurable. When you choose to engage in real self-reflection, you choose to face yourself, your fears, your imperfections, and your doubts. This process isn't about perfection. It's about courage. It's about looking inward and acknowledging the parts of yourself that you might not want to see. And in doing so, you allow yourself the grace to grow and evolve in ways you never thought possible. By engaging with the reflection that is more than just physical, you begin to understand how your actions, words, and choices ripple outward. No longer are you simply living for yourself. You start to understand how your presence impacts the world. And that awareness shifts the way you move through life. You stop being self-centered and become more self-aware. You begin to live with intention, understanding that the choices you make don't just affect you, they affect everyone around you. But self-reflection is also about recognizing when you are stuck in a cycle of self-centeredness and catching yourself before you go too far. It's easy to get caught up in the narrative that the world owes you something, that you deserve more than others, or that your needs should always come first. But when you start to see yourself clearly, you realize that living a fulfilling life requires more than just fulfilling your own desires. It's important to remember that the mirror you hold up to yourself isn't meant to judge or shame you. It's meant to help you see the truth. When we shy away from self-reflection, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to evolve. Instead of seeing our imperfections as flaws, we begin to see them as opportunities for growth and compassion. True self-reflection comes from a place of self-love, not self-criticism. As you look at yourself through the lens of honest self-reflection, allow yourself to soften. Be kind to the parts of you that are hurting or confused. Self-reflection is about understanding that you are a work in progress. You are not your mistakes or your past actions. You are the sum of everything you've experienced, and every experience offers you a chance to evolve into someone who is more connected, more present, and more empathetic. So, take the time to look deeply. Look beyond the surface, see yourself as you truly are, a beautiful, imperfect human being trying to navigate a complex and often difficult world. But also, in that same mirror, take a moment to see the faces of those around you. The relationships you cherish, the people who depend on you, and the ones who love you unconditionally. Recognize that the way you show up in the world matters, not just for you, but for all the people who will cross your path today, tomorrow, and beyond. Consequences of self-centeredness? Self-centeredness feels good at first, doesn't it? The world revolves around you. And for a moment, it seems like a comforting thought. You become the center of your own universe, and your desires, needs, and wants take priority above all else. But here's the thing, over time, that feeling of satisfaction fades. What was once fulfilling becomes hollow. You realize that no matter how much you seek attention, validation, or self-preservation, there's an emptiness that no amount of ego stroking can fill. Self-centeredness has a way of making you feel invincible. You think that by focusing solely on your own needs, you're safeguarding yourself from harm. You build walls to protect your heart, to keep yourself from being vulnerable or hurt. But in doing so, you shut out the very thing that makes life worth living: connection. The paradox of self-centeredness is that it isolates you, even though it promises protection. The cost of self-centeredness is not always immediate, but it is inevitable. Over time, the people around you start to feel unseen, unheard, and unimportant. You stop listening to them, you stop considering their needs, and in doing so, you diminish the very relationships that give your life meaning. You may think that by putting yourself first, you're ensuring your happiness, but the truth is, happiness isn't built on isolation. It's built on love, connection, and vulnerability. Self-centeredness leads to a world of transactional relationships. You start to view people as tools to get what you want, rather than as beings with their own needs and desires. This way of thinking makes everything feel like a zero-sum game. If you win, they lose. But in reality, life isn't about winners and losers. It's about shared experiences, mutual respect, and co-creating meaning with the people you love. When you focus on yourself, you fail to see the impact you have on the lives of others. The simple truth is this: we are all connected. Your actions, words, and energy affect the people around you. If you're constantly putting yourself first, you're not considering how your actions might hurt someone else or prevent them from thriving. This lack of empathy creates a ripple effect that harms the relationships you care about most. It's important to understand that self-centeredness is rooted in fear. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of being rejected, and fear of being judged. So we build walls, we put on masks, and we protect ourselves at all costs. But what we often fail to recognize is that true strength lies in vulnerability. It's not in hiding behind a facade of control or perfection. It's in opening yourself up to the world, to the people around you, and to the possibility of connection, even if it means taking risks. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create space for others to do the same. We move from a place of self-protection to a place of mutual trust and understanding. The beauty of vulnerability is that it fosters empathy. It allows us to see and feel what others are experiencing. And when we do that, our relationships deepen, our connections strengthen, and our lives become richer in ways that self-centeredness could never offer. The consequences of self-centeredness are not always dramatic. They don't always show up as overt arguments or conflicts. Sometimes they show up in quiet moments of distance, the absence of warmth, the lack of shared experiences, the growing gap between you and the people you love. Over time, these small moments of neglect add up. And before you know it, you're left with the cold realization that you've built a life of isolation, one decision at a time. But here's the thing you can always change. You can break free from the cycle of self-centeredness by choosing to embrace empathy, kindness, and vulnerability. The first step is acknowledging the consequences of your actions, not to shame yourself, but to learn from them. The second step is making the conscious choice to engage with others from a place of openness, generosity, and care. Living a life of connection is not always easy. It requires showing up even when it feels uncomfortable. It requires giving more than you take. It requires vulnerability and the willingness to be seen, flaws and all. But in doing so, you create relationships that nourish your soul and fill you with a sense of purpose that self-centeredness could never provide. The beauty of empathy is that it brings you closer to others while also helping you heal yourself. When you stop focusing on yourself and start focusing on the needs of those around you, you begin to understand that true fulfillment comes not from self-serving actions, but from acts of kindness and generosity. This shift in perspective doesn't just benefit others, it benefits you as well, because you begin to experience the joy that comes from giving without expecting anything in return. So, the next time you're tempted to fall into the trap of self-centeredness, pause and ask yourself, what is the true cost of my actions? Are you willing to sacrifice connection, trust, and love for the fleeting satisfaction of serving only yourself? The choice is yours, but I promise you the road to true happiness lies in the willingness to embrace others, not just yourself. The value of relationships. We are by nature social creatures. Our lives are shaped and defined by the relationships we cultivate and the connections we make with others. There's something profoundly human about sharing experiences, challenges, and joys with those we trust and love. But here's the hard truth. Relationships aren't always easy. They require effort, vulnerability, and a willingness to give without expecting anything in return. When we invest in relationships, we are investing in our own growth and fulfillment. And perhaps more importantly, we're contributing to a culture of empathy and connection that can change the world. Relationships are not just about having people around you. They are about building spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued. It's easy to assume that our relationships are strong simply because we share time and space with someone. But the real value lies in the depth of connection. Do you truly understand the people in your life? Do you actively listen to them, or are you too preoccupied with your own needs and desires? Relationships flourish when we move beyond surface-level interactions and allow ourselves to be vulnerable and authentic with one another. At the heart of any meaningful relationship is trust. Trust is the foundation upon which everything else is built. It's the quiet assurance that you can count on someone, that they will show up for you in times of joy and in times of pain. But trust doesn't come easily. It's earned through consistent actions, vulnerability, and care. When we prioritize our own needs over the well-being of others, we erode that trust slowly but surely. The value of relationships is not just in what we get from them, but in how we show up for the people who matter most. The most fulfilling relationships are the ones where both parties can be their truest selves. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. You don't have to wear a mask of perfection or self-interest. The beauty of genuine connection is that it allows us to be raw and real without fear of judgment. This kind of relationship requires a certain level of emotional bravery. It asks us to show our scars, our imperfections, and to trust that we will still be loved and accepted. There's no denying that relationships take work. They require time, energy, and often sacrifices. But what we gain in return is immeasurable. Relationships are the spaces where we grow, heal, and find strength. They are the places where we celebrate our successes and find comfort in our struggles. No amount of success, material wealth, or achievement can replace the feeling of being loved and supported by the people around you. These are the moments that stay with you, that shape your sense of purpose and belonging. When we make the decision to prioritize relationships, we shift our focus from individual success to collective well-being. We begin to see the world not as a competition, but as a shared experience. Every person you meet has their own story, their own struggles, and their own triumphs. By choosing to invest in relationships, you open yourself up to learning from others, to being inspired, and to finding strength in community. But we must also be mindful that not all relationships are healthy, and some may even be toxic. There's a difference between maintaining relationships out of obligation and maintaining relationships that genuinely nurture and support you. When we invest in relationships that don't honor our value or well-being, we harm ourselves in the process. It's crucial to recognize when a relationship is no longer serving you and to have the courage to let it go. True relationships are built on mutual respect, empathy, and care. They nourish both individuals and allow both to grow into the best versions of themselves. There's also a vulnerability in building relationships, particularly when you've been hurt before. Trust can be hard to rebuild once it's been broken. But healing starts with the willingness to open your heart again. It starts with choosing connection, even when it feels risky. And it's in those moments when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable that we experience the deepest forms of human connection. The risk of being hurt is real, but the reward of being seen, understood, and loved is far greater. As we navigate our relationships, we must remember that they are not static. They evolve and change over time. People grow, they change, and they face challenges that impact how they show up in your life. The key to maintaining strong relationships is adaptability. You must be willing to grow with the people in your life, to support them through their changes, and to allow them to support you in yours. Relationships are not about holding on tightly to a fixed version of someone, but about evolving together. One of the most beautiful aspects of relationships is the sense of belonging they provide. When you build deep, authentic relationships, you create a network of support, love, and trust that carries you through life's most difficult moments. There's no greater comfort than knowing you have people who will stand by you, who will listen to you, and who will help you rise when you fall. These relationships become your safety net, your source of resilience, and your source of strength. The value of relationships is immeasurable because they are what make life truly meaningful. Our success, achievements, and accolades may give us temporary satisfaction, but it's the people we share our lives with that bring true fulfillment. The moments of connection, of laughter, of shared vulnerability, these are the experiences that stay with us forever. To importance of accountability. Accountability is the foundation of personal integrity. It's the ability to hold ourselves responsible for our actions, our words, and our choices, regardless of the external circumstances. Being accountable isn't about blaming or punishing ourselves. It's about taking ownership of our behaviors and their consequences. It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose, and with that power comes the responsibility to act with intention and care. In a world where shifting blame and deflecting responsibility often feels like the easier path, choosing accountability can be a transformative act of courage and self-respect. The act of being accountable begins with self-awareness. It requires us to pause and reflect before we speak or act, considering the impact of our choices on ourselves and others. When we act impulsively or out of emotion, we often miss the opportunity to evaluate the consequences of our actions. But when we choose to be accountable, we slow down and take the time to understand how our words or behaviors might affect the people around us. Accountability starts with the decision to be intentional, to make conscious choices that align with our values. It's easy to slip into the habit of deflecting responsibility, especially when we're confronted with uncomfortable truths about our own behavior. We may justify our actions, blame external circumstances, or point the finger at others. But when we take accountability, we stop looking for excuses and instead focus on how we can make things right. This requires humility, the ability to admit that we've made mistakes and that we are not above reproach. It means owning up to our flaws, our errors, and our missteps without hiding behind denial or defensiveness. Accountability also means learning from our mistakes. When we take responsibility for our actions, we commit to learning from them so that we don't repeat them in the future. It's a commitment to growth, to becoming better and more self-aware each day. This doesn't mean we will never make mistakes again, but it does mean that we approach our errors with a mindset of learning and improvement. Accountability is a tool for personal development, a pathway to becoming the best version of ourselves. When we choose accountability, we also build trust with others. People respect those who can own their actions, even when they make mistakes. Accountability shows that we are dependable, that we can be trusted to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. It's an invitation for others to trust us with their feelings, their vulnerabilities, and their lives. Accountability fosters deeper, more authentic relationships because it creates a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. However, accountability doesn't mean taking on the blame for everything that goes wrong. It's about acknowledging the things we have control over and understanding the distinction between what is ours to own and what belongs to others. Often we take on too much responsibility, feeling guilty for things that aren't entirely our fault. But true accountability is about owning our actions and choices while also recognizing the boundaries of our responsibility. One of the most powerful aspects of accountability is its ability to create a ripple effect. When we hold ourselves accountable, we inspire others to do the same. Accountability isn't just about self-discipline. It's about creating a culture where everyone takes responsibility for their actions. It fosters a community of honesty, transparency, and trust. And when we live in a community that values accountability, we all grow together, supporting each other in our journeys of self-awareness and self-improvement. Being accountable also requires us to be patient with ourselves. We are all on a journey, and that journey includes setbacks, stumbles, and growth. Holding ourselves accountable doesn't mean we demand perfection. It means we demand honesty and integrity. It means acknowledging that we are all human, and part of being human is making mistakes. But it also means that we take responsibility for those mistakes and work to ensure they don't define us. Accountability is about progress, not perfection. In some ways, accountability is a form of self-respect. When we take responsibility for our actions, we honor our values and our integrity. We show ourselves the same compassion and care that we offer to others. By holding ourselves accountable, we affirm that we are worthy of respect, both from others and from ourselves. Accountability is not about self-punishment, it's about self-respect and growth. Sometimes accountability requires us to take uncomfortable actions. It may involve apologizing for past wrongs, making amends, or changing the way we approach a particular situation. These actions can be difficult and they may require a level of vulnerability that is hard to face. But the process of being accountable is often where we find the most growth. It's through these moments of discomfort that we learn who we truly are and what we are capable of. Accountability challenges us to stretch beyond our limits and become the person we aspire to be. In the long run, accountability strengthens our character. It builds resilience, humility, and integrity. It teaches us that we are not perfect, but we are always capable of learning and growing. The more we practice accountability, the more we cultivate the qualities that make us strong, compassionate, and wise. And when we embrace accountability, we take ownership of not just our mistakes, but also our successes. We recognize that we are the architects of our own lives, and it is through our choices that we shape our future.